Yeah, hi everybody. Welcome to the first TouchDesigner Roundtable after the pandemic. Of course, we're in the middle of it. But yeah, we saw it's time to meet in person again. And so we're very happy to see familiar faces here, but also some unfamiliar. So I'm going to introduce the idea of the TouchDesigner Roundtable, which is basically, yeah, we just meeting each other and get to know. So of course, we have these little presentations, which shouldn't be sort of to be too high profile, right? So everybody's welcome to do a presentation, ask questions to the community, show something that they think is fun or interesting for everybody else. The main point, I guess, is just to be able to talk to each other. So if you don't know each other, don't be shy, just introduce yourself to people or chat around. And for the future, because the presentations is of course what makes it a bit entertaining, so everybody's really welcome to write to me. I'm Stefan Kraus at the Node Institute, or Stefan Kraus at MXZEHN.de, and tell me your idea, because it's not so easy to always find 2-3 people who want to present something. Or it's kind of the salt in the soup or the foam on the beer. Yeah, so because this one was quite on short notice, so we just put ourselves, the organizers, as speakers, so it was easier to organize. So I'm going to start. Then Wieland is going to talk a bit about what he's working on. And finally, our star guest from Toronto, Markus Heckmann. You've met him at the bar. And he's a bit the reason that we do this now, because he's in Berlin at the moment, and it's always a pleasure to have him in person. Yeah, if you have any questions in between, just shout. This is supposed to be a very informal event. Okay. So yeah, the project I'm gonna talk about is something that I did in 2019 for the first time, and then just last year again. And it was a nice project. So basically, this was done for the opening of the Bauhaus Museum in Weimar. And yeah, some friends of mine put together like a little spectacle on a place next to it, which is pretty big. So the idea was, what can we do that is really big, but still affordable, and that relates to the Bauhaus. So of course, I came up with the line. So this is basically one line of LEDs, 3,000 dots. And then to make it a bit more complicated, maybe that was a mistake, was also the idea that each of these lines, so it's 10 lines, are 5 meters with an LED strip on it, then they can also rotate. But due to budget, they can only rotate about 180 degrees, and then you have to go back again. So this was a bit a risk we took, and I'm not sure if it was a great idea, because if you show something that can rotate to people, their expectation is pretty much that it can rotate, and well, if that has to go back to do something again, it's a bit, wasn't maybe not the best idea. But it was fun to think about a control system for that. My idea first was, of course, this is like, important arty style, so we have like this very careful done choreography. But then you have like 3 evenings, they go 5 hours each, and there's no real beginning, no real end. So in the end, I was VJing it also, because at that time I really had a hard time to find a way to make it, to really sequence a show with TouchDesigner, right? It's like you can play around with all kinds of stuff, but then to say, well, I want 15 minutes that follow a choreography, and I want to test and rehearse it. At that time, I wasn't quite there yet. Just going to show you a few pictures. So this was like kind of the motor head that we had. This is how it looked. I mean, to be fair, at this installment, there were also like 2 other installations there. So a light cube that's now not visible, and then a pretty big laser installation from Daniel Dalfofo at Vodo, also controlled with TouchDesigner. In the aftermath, and that's why there's all this fog. That was also part of the installation, that there was big fog. One problem that I see now is if you take a picture of that, I mean, here it's quite visible what is the line installation. and what is the laser, but most photographs it's totally unclear what is what, which was kind of cool on the spot, very psychedelic experience, you know, you don't know what's upside, what's downside, but from an artist's point of view, it's a bit of a problem if every documentation image shows like 3 different installations, and you kind of have to argue like, okay, forget about this, and just look at that. So this is it again without the other thing. One thing that I wanted in the beginning was, because they can turn, I was thinking it would be interesting if we could send content on it in a way that if people make like a long time photography, suddenly something could appear, like in that sense, these Bauhaus letters, for example. Because in that iteration, there was some mistakes in the control of the motors that didn't quite work out. And I mean, if you wonder, I'm not going to talk much about the art aspect of it. I'm just going to talk more about the problems and the learnings from that, because we're the TouchDesigner Roundtable and not pretending, right? So this was kind of the pre-visualization. So the controlling the LED parts was relatively straightforward, but wasn't so straightforward was controlling the rotation of the motors. I'm going to say more about that later. Yeah, so then the next opportunity came 2 years later. Long story how it came about, but basically it was like, well, I already have this installation. And this one, the story was a bit that I was giving a workshop at the Bauhaus University with students, and the idea was, the expectations was a bit that the students developed this light installation within a little Fachkurs, and of course that's not realistic. So I said, well, I already got one. I had some difficulties to make good content for it. Let's develop the content with the students. And so in this installment, there was like a show by me, 15 minutes, and then 2 shows by students, 15 minutes. And so the problem of how do you actually sequence that stuff and how do you make kind of a movie for that and don't have to VJ it came up on the plate again. And this time I had to come up with a system that also allowed me to, you know, give the students the opportunity to do something for that and then play it back, and in the worst case scenario still jump in and VJ the whole thing. So this looked like that. It was like a different location. As you can see, it was also very wet. This was this August, so basically the whole thing was flooded for 3 days, which also caused considerable problems. But here you can also see that this idea of taking a long time photograph actually would work in a way. But one problem with photographing these LEDs in darkness is that they're so bright that if you not really go super professional about the photography, it's just always either way too bright or doesn't look right. So these are all taken by a professional. My own pictures, yeah, you don't want to see them. So this is just to give you a bit of an idea what the thing was. I mean, in the best case, it has quite some alien presence, especially in between the trees somewhere in a park. But it ended like it always ends. In the end, it was VJ'd, and this is my friend Max, who was the curator of the first installment, and he was super happy when he was. David smiles because he knows Max. Max loves to perform this kind of stuff. And you give him a slider in TouchDesigner, and then he will rock that slider for half an hour and be really happy about it. And that's what he did. Okay, to the hardware. So basically, we had 2 of these Pixelite 16 long-range encoders from Advatech. So they got fed from ArtNet from TouchDesigner, already encoded. And the cool thing about them is that these and that's what makes them long range. So basically on this board the whole encoding for the LED is happening, but then you can send that through the network ports on the bottom to these little receivers, and they then hook up to the LEDs. So this board is doing all the hard work, and then you can wire with just a network cable to the individual fixtures and just have to plug it in. and connect the LEDs. And I mentioned this here because this thing was working really, really well. I can only recommend it. I didn't have any problems with it. It was super stable. My first thinking was, okay, if we send out this ArtNet, then we could have also one channel for the motor rotation. But through this long range, because what comes out here at the fixture is already encoded for the LEDs, it's not ArtNet anymore. So you would have to kind of code it back from the LED encoding, which nobody knew how to do. So we decided to, we had these things which receive ArtNet and are able to control servo motors from like an English small company. And so basically we had to send an extra network cable. So there was 2 network cables going into the fixture, one for all the LEDs and one just for the rotation, which sounds a bit stupid, but in the end it was pretty straightforward. You just put in 2 wires. These were the motors that were controlled. And this was kind of the one part of the setup. A friend Trashy built them basically in Euroboxes. So you take the roof of a Eurobox as the bottom, and then you can put the Eurobox on top, and this stays, and put the thing on bricks, and this stays super waterproof even on rain. And it's fairly cheap. The only issue is if you have to take it off while it rains, and then you have all the water, which then might find its way in, but it didn't most of the time. So this was kind of two of these distribution things, the network switch and the Pixlite. And then for each fixture, we had again a box with the receiver here, the power supplies and power, and then the motors were connected with the axis on which finally the tube was fixed. So this was kind of our dry test. And in the aftermath, I have to say that this net servo things, I mean, maybe we did something wrong, but we never got really reliable results out of them. So I would be a bit careful about them, or if you want to use them, maybe give them a lot of testing. I'm not 100% convinced as I was from the Advatec thing. The other issue, of course, that we had is that it's pretty rare to just fix. So this is Gregor who built the connectors with a mill, and so in this wood form, which was screwed onto the axis of the motor, we put like 5-meter fiber rods, because they're very stiff but very light, because there's a lot of power going to this axis, and this was also a bit taking a risk. Could work, could not work. In the end, we never got really precise positioning, which then kind of soured the whole wine a bit.
We got a question from the chat. What is a Eurobox?
A Eurobox is, if you well, it's a plastic box which you can buy at Obi and any Baumarkt. They all have them from different brands, but they're in standard formats. So they fit on a pallet. Smaller Euroboxes fit into bigger Euroboxes, and they're quite standardized. And they're cheap, relatively. So this were the RGB LEDs, black strip fixed with tape onto the fiber rods, and because the workshop was quite close to the location, we could transport it all very sustainable by foot on these little carts. So this is basically the base constructions, and these were the rods. And this is how then one fixture looks. So it has like a wood base with bricks to give it weight, and a few other wood things to level out the height, and on top it has like a steel head again for the motors and everything. These were fabricated after plans by someone. Of course, the issue then, if you want to put like so many of those things into a straight line, and because they're light, you will see if they're like 2 centimeters off or a centimeter off. This is on the other location. It was quite always a bit of measurement to actually get them in a line, to get them straight. And Gregor did this with kind of architect's know-how with this theodolit, whatever it's called in English. And then the second level, then there was the step where they had to be in the water when being screwed onto the axis, so that then at the end they were really one line. And then you can still go and adjust them mechanically. But only if all that happened, then you're really capable to show the line. Yeah, and it's quite a lot of fine-tuning. Takeaways from there was also that because the control wire comes in through the middle, the LED tape had to be cut in the middle and soldered, and everything was like made as waterproof as possible. But as this installment, it really rained almost 3 days non-stop, and tiny amounts of water still got into it. So what they will do is they will not destroy the thing. It's actually not so much of a problem for the LEDs seemingly, but it will mess with the control data. So suddenly all will be red, or now you will lose the signal. And it was fixable by pressing around with it or being there with a hot fan, but I mean, it's pretty stupid if you want to do a show and then constantly somebody comes with the ladder and goes up and has to fix something. So waterproof, yes, but waterproof has to be much more waterproof if even the slightest humidity, not even like direct water, but just humidity that collects somewhere even under all the glue that you put in, that will already be enough to control the control data. Yeah, and so that's him constantly fixing the lines. But because it was raining so much, there was also not much audience, so most of this went unseen. That was good. So the other thing I want to talk more about is the software that I used to do this. And basically I used two modules. One where I can sequence animations, test animations, and then another one which is the pre-visualization, which is basically just a TouchDesigner patch that listens to the ArtNet, that will also go to the real fixture and does in the best case the same thing. What this hasn't prepared me for is that the whole rotation under real world situation, yeah, it's just like you want them to go vertical and then stand, and what they do is they go vertical and then they do this because it's 5 meters length or 2.5 meters to the edge and so on. So that was a bit frustrating. But the thing that I want mainly to talk about was, and also maybe have a few questions for the community, was this control system. I was using the bare bone scene changer, and I was modding it a little bit. And if you're familiar with it, if you're not, I can only recommend. It's pretty super simple system to sequence scenes. So basically it eats a component full of scenes, which is mainly just components, and these components, for the most simple part, they could be just like that. They could be just a black image on the output. So these ones, the black ones, are just pauses in between. It's also good to explain. So the upper one would be the color information for the LEDs, and the rotation for the LEDs was also encoded in black and white values. So you could also kind of see from the pixel colors, are they vertical or 45 degrees or other positions. Where it becomes more interesting that each of these scenes, and to make them a scene for the scene changer, is mainly that they're called scene, that they're in this folder which the scene changer refers to, and that they have a tag which says that they're TD scene. I don't know if you're familiar with tags and comments. These are two things that are often overseen. I, for a long time, didn't know what they do. But for example, not just by making this TD scene, it has a tag, it's findable under this tag, it's by an op finder, and then the scene changer knows this belongs to the show. And I also made use of the comments where you can just quickly type something in. What are they actually? And you can see that also very quickly when you middle mouse click. So here you see the comments and here you see the tags that belong to them. What they can do when they're a bit more complex, they'll have a timer in them. And this timer will automatically will be triggered when the scene is being loaded from the scene changer. So you don't really have to care about that. From that you can do all kinds of things. This obviously was then one I used for live VJing. So this is basically a bunch of, real-time scenes that just lay there. It doesn't cost anything until the scene changer loads them, and then they automatically start playing. What I was adding to them is basically an information how they progress of the timer. So this I put out as a custom parameter, how long they are and how many times they go through a cycle. So this one is 60 seconds long. In this case of a real-time scene, this would also set the length. This runs for 60 seconds and then it repeats 10 times. And the other thing that I needed was to be able to play pre-recorded situations, for example, the movies from the students. So in here I have one scene changer that reads the real-time scenes, and this is all, different sketches of shows. They can be just linked up by just not writing their name in here. And then there's a second one called the template changer. So again, that is the same thing, just that in there is pre-recorded movies. For example, here it's just a movie player, again that's driven by the timer. And so when the changer loads this scene, it will just play back that movie. And for those one, I output again like a comment, and they're also tagged TD scene. And this whole thing then, if we run it as in performance mode, it looks like this. So basically up here we have the scene timer. So that's basically the show with all the real-time scenes, and this is driven by a timer job. So maybe I should say that, yeah. So the scene changer is kind of prefabricated, and what I did here is I kind of find out which scene is or which container is loaded, and from that I kind of extract a list of all the content is there with their length, and that way the timer, and then you can feed that as segments to the timer, and then the timer basically has everything that's in that container with the scenes as a consecutive show. And the nice thing about a timer is that, well, you can say go to the next segment, go to previous segment, jump to a scene. It tells me which scene is running, how many times it cycles, and you can output lots of time information in this timecode format. So it says the scene is 1 minute long. At the moment it has played that much. The whole segment has that length. So much playtime is left. How many scenes are overall in this timer or in the show, how much time is remaining until we arrive at the end, and how much time is it overall when I just let the timer do its thing. So I can basically run all the procedural scenes from here, or I can also manually jump to them. So the advantage is this will show me which is running. Here I get some more information about the one that is running, but here I can also directly jump to it without using the timer, and if I just click here I will be in the... So I can basically have this running and work on another scene while it's running before it hits that scene. Of course I don't see it on the output, but I can do everything inside. this here allows me to, I mean, this, of course, if this is like an internal interface, this is not for anybody else. If it would be proper UI design, this fader would be quite important, because this allows me to either play the scenes which are coming from here or the templates which are coming from here. And so basically here you could, even while the scene is running, change over to the template player, and that would run the output. So you can seamlessly go back and forth between them. And down here is the template changer. It's pretty much the same thing, a timer that reads in all the template scenes and gives me a way to jump between them or play them in a sequence. And here I can jump directly at them. And because basically I used this one to build the shows, give them order, give the single elements a length, and then that could run and it could be recorded here into a template, and that template then could be part of the template player again. So it's basically two things, one which allows to sequence real-time scenes automatically or manually, and the other one runs pre-recorded movies automatically or manually. And that worked quite well for me, but the downside is, and maybe someone of you has an idea how to do that better. I'm smiling at you, Wieland. The issue is, I find, I mean, all of this is a bit, you know, it's not like Resolume or something, but it works quite well. It also works quite well to just, you know, take a scene, change it, have it in this big pot of scenes. The only problem is that the sequence in which they're played is defined by the name that they have. So when I decide that scene 1, scene 2 actually would fit much better down here, then I have to go to rename them. You could say, yeah, that's okay, no, you can do it, but if you want to be fast, it's not ideal. And I was thinking maybe something like Lister, they all get renamed automatically when I change the order, but that was a bit over my head. Or I would have maybe found a way, but I didn't have the time. So at this point, I'm quite happy with the system to combine the timer with the scene changer and read automatically everything that's in the scene changer to make a playlist for the timer. That works quite well, but yeah, how do I make this more intuitive? How can I just, what I would like to have, that I can basically drag and drop them here around, and it would just automatically realize that this is here and position 12, and automatically names it to 12 when I drag it there. I'm aware that that's probably not going to happen this way. Yeah, I think at this point I would stop, because we're probably already way over time. But this is kind of my question to you, but I'm of course also very open for any questions from you to me. Maybe it was also not the best presentation, but I only did that to emphasize that the presentations here don't have to be high level. They're just a conversation between like-minded people, not customers or anything like that. Listening?
The nodes have a
Y position,
In which I could get in Python. But could I find out if I take this one and drag it down, that I've dragged this and that this should be renamed now?
It wouldn't rename it, so you would just order them differently where it's being named.
I mean, generally it's good to have a distinction anyway between the names of the things you have and the order that they have. Like, they don't have to be the same thing.
That's what I was thinking, but then I would get out, kind of jump out of the system of the scene changer. If
Like,
I
it's better to have like a cat that you know is in the order of 1 than to call it cat 1 and then consider that to be the order. So just completely separate those two and just give them meaningful names for you, and then the order
So you would kind of have a separate interface, which, let's say, pulls in the thumbnails of and the names of the things, and then I could reorder that, and then say, okay, write this to order.
Yeah, I see you not doing a lot of nodding, so maybe you want to say something.
No. I got 2 comments from the chat. So first is from Bubi Ribaviri, and he says, dude, you need a more complex UI done in JavaScript and communicate with WebSockets to control that setup. And from Greg we have, hi Stefan, really elegant.
Okay, so you can always
Yeah.
have 2
But
views onto it.
maybe my 2 cents in that regard would be to just give it probably like an order parameter, which is just a simple int, and then in the scene changer logic go in and use the order parameter to use like a sort that and just reorder them based on this specific parameter. So this way basically what Mickey said is a good idea to decouple the naming from the actual order.
Yeah, I think that's also the only way to not get it super chaotic
Yeah.
in a way.
I actually made a component that is in the Oli, just called the lister mix, that actually is doing what you're asking with the lister. So when I drag, I actually save, for example, in my case, I mixed the lister with a multi-mix, and then I have a kind of Photoshop things happening with it, okay? So each time I drag a layer, while I'm dragging, I'm locking a loop and save the data in a Python storage, and then when the drag action ended, I load the preset saved in the storage, and with the name I match everything. So I have things happening. And I'm actually making a kind of a feedback data in chop, so I can put back the order without feedback, and I have no feedback issue. It's in the Oli.
It's in the Olib. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna. Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the OLIP, because that's going to be our next presentation. But I think we should have a little break, so everybody can not smoke a cigarette or have another drink or chat. But of course, if you have questions or comments or something. Yeah, let's.
The order parameter is basically, because it's containers anyway, it has an order parameter.
Yeah,
So, but we could use that.
that one. Yeah, the thing that I kind of want, and that's why Mickey's argument is good, that I want to see the order, right? I want like a tracker view or a timeline view where I think, okay, this goes to the end now and this goes here. So having it separate, doing that process and then writing it to the order without doing it in here would probably be the least thing where you also have the potential to destroy everything, which I think is there in the process.
The way I would go about it is just writing a script, and usually when I switch to scenes or to scenes, right, and write a script to switch those around in position and also exchange the names and types to some hotkey or something. So you select the two scenes.
So basically select 1, select 2, and then run the script and it just exchange them. Oh, that would also be nice. That's very lightweight.
Yeah.
Oh. Cool. Yeah, thank you for your input. I'm gonna, in the next iteration, I'm gonna solve that somehow.
Are you planning to do the next iteration, or?
Yeah, maybe not for that project, because after the rainy days the LEDs are pretty fucked. So, and I don't want to do the rotation anymore, because it's kind of stupid that you can't do 180 degrees and that they're not precise and so on.
I mean, that's a different thing that maybe we can talk about later. It's like using a PID algorithm to be able to kind of like assess the overshoot.
Yeah, but I think there's all this mechanics and all this physics that you just can't, that we were just a bit too positive about, that we could ignore it.
You can't ignore it, no.
No.
No, you can factor it in. Like,
So yeah, by taking the overshoot into account, but still, when they stop, they just wouldn't stop, right? So they would still swing, and that's something that you can only solve mechanically, I guess.
you can also figure that out in a PID algorithm to be able to kind of really make it that it stops and stays.
By breaking,
Like what it does is basically
slowing
like-
it down before.
With the PID algorithm, if you have a value and it goes up, it like overshoots and undershoots a bit until it stays into place. And this sort of cancels out the motion.
Right. Okay.
Giving it like a counter impulse to the natural overshoot. And
Yeah,
just,
that sounds
giving
smart.
a counter force to it.
Yeah, it's like it's a feedback loop of like the forces to be able to sort of like funnel into place.
But you would have to measure the forces that are happening, or
you don't have to measure them. You just need to set the right parameters, basically.
you could anticipate them.
Yeah, kind of. Like gravity might do a different thing there. That's the only thing that's maybe harder to know. You know.
That it's different to stop
If you
there
stop at
than.
the top is different than stopping at like quarter past or something.
Yeah. Yeah, the thought was if we do this installation again, we want that much budget, then we can do an actual 360 degree turning thing and do the mechanics right. And until then, maybe not. But I'll definitely keep on working on this scenes plus timer thing, because I haven't found a better way to get my stuff organized and be still fast and intuitive about it, or kind of the thing to be able to VJ on one end while reordering it on the other end. That's kind of cool, I thought. And I don't think that I need like a more elegant interface for that. If it's only me who's using it, it's kind of a waste. Okay, but yeah, let's have a little break and then go to Wieland. Oh, this shut off.
David, ich hoffe, du hast doch deinen gebrandeten Pulli an.
getroffen, aber ich habe es nicht mehr geschafft. Das hat mich so geärgert, weil dann ist das so, na, geht ja beim nächsten Monat durch. Schade, schade, so war das nicht geplant, leider. Deshalb freut mich das, wenn das funktioniert.
Das wieder geworden ist, genau.
Me too.
Hello stream. You can hear me, but you can't see me, and I'm going to turn myself on. Yeah, hello stream. We're waiting for everyone to get in, because the TouchDesigner Roundtable was filmed in front of a live audience. Make some noise! So, we're still a little bit waiting. Ich brauche einen Stream Operator. Achso, nee, ich habe schon. Also wir sind schon live. Du musst dann. Warte mal, du musst dann hier musst du drauf drücken und auch drauf.
Du gibst mir das Zeichen.
Last guests are coming in stream. I hope you are stoked. All right. So, hi, I'm Wieland, and today I'm going to talk about the OLIP. And I think my first question is, who has heard of the OLIP? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people of 16. Chat, how about you? I mean, we have a little bit of delay, so I'm going to continue anyway. So, another question, who uses the OLIP? Okay, we have 4 people. Who contributes to the OLIP? I see you. Okay, so another question, who has heard of Chop Chop Chop? Oh, quite a lot of more people. So what is the OLIP? Show the OLIP. The OLIP basically is the uncomplicated answer to Chop Chop Chop. Because Chop 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 had the basic idea of being able to sell your own TouchDesigner components. And with selling components, we started, of course, to have a lot of problems in a way, because there are taxing issues. There are always, when you sell something, you have like kind of this obligation to support your components. And another problem, of course, is what kind of price tag do you put on your components or your systems, and what kind of systems do you sell on a platform like this? And I started to do a little bit of web development, mainly beginning 2020, and I fucking hate NPM. But I also kind of like the idea of NPM. Who doesn't know what NPM is? It's a node package manager. So basically the idea in a lot of cases of web development is you don't have to do it yourself because there's a package for that. Or the number one answer is, yeah, we'll see if there's a package for that. So what is the same as a package? For TouchDesign, it's a component, it's a TOX. So I ventured out to learn web development, and I built the first version of the OLIP it was not good. I was missing quite a lot of concepts about web development, like server-side rendering, stuff like this. And after a while, I ventured out, learned more web development, learned about server-side rendering, for example. So now you can share components from the OLIP, and they will appear in social networks or in a forum post, for example, nice with like a little teaser text with a snippet text and a header image if there is any. And this works really well. So I think right now what the OLIP is like it's the largest repository of user-generated components for TouchDesigner in the world. Saying 80% or like 80 components are from me. But we have quite a lot of contributors. One is sitting over there. And yeah, how does it work, or what is the idea? It's like there are larger systems, like for example the TouchDesigner preset management system, but there are also smaller components that you can use to build up larger systems. And I use the system a lot myself. So it's like I'm creating my own components, loading them up, and then I use them a lot in projects. And so often you will see when I start to update components quite regularly in a short time frame, you see, okay, I'm again working on a project where I'm using this specific component. For example, the private investigator, the dict model, for example, is also quite nice, and the OLIP dependency, whatever. And when you go to olip.amb-service.net, you will be greeted by this screen here, and so we have the recent updates category, and you can like look a little bit around here. We have the most downloaded, and the most downloaded component already with over 1,000 downloads. Quite nice. This is the sub-UV unwrapper, so congrats to the guy sitting there in the back. And then we have different categories. We have helper components, so these are like small components that you can use all sprinkled over your projects. You have visual generators. We have filters, so basically a generator just has an output, a filter has an input and an output. We have system builder components, which are more integral. So for example, TCP IP sender or the Google text-to-speech API component. The event listener, event emitter components. We have experiments, we have examples. So if you have a workshop, for example, and preparing examples, it's also possible to just upload them to the OLIP. And we have UI components. So for example, something like the Lunochart UI builder component. And yeah, what we can do is when we click on any of these components, we get to this little site. So here we have description text, some information like a README. And on the right we have versions. And this is something I find quite important, and this is something which differs the OLIP from, for example, the derivative community page, where managing different versions of a component can get quite complicated. Also, this is super restricted here because you can only upload a TOX file. So you can't upload a zip, you can't upload a TOW, you can't post a link or anything. No, it's just like you have to put in the TOX file. And this is super important, and we will get to that later. And basically you have a version number and a build number, where a build number is, it should not break from one build to the next. And if we have an increase in versions, so for example, if this would now be at 2.0, this means that we have a breaking version change, where like the API changes or the way it behaves changes. And yeah, basically you can always go back to an older version if it's necessary in any way. And yeah, we have some patch notes. So for example, here for the tweener I made like, okay, small code refactor, you can read in. And we have some buttons. I think they're basically the same everywhere. It's like, okay, it's macOS supported. Not all components do that. It's Windows supported. I'm not sure if there is a component that's not supported on Windows, but on macOS. If it's locked or not, and if you can use it in a commercial way. In general, when using components from the OLIP, when we take in the OLIP, it's like they are delivered as is. So you have in no way a right to, except you paid the person afterwards, you have in no way right to make someone verantwortlich.
responsible?
Yeah, like the creator and the uploader of the component is not responsible for what you do with the component. That's something to keep in mind. And it's the same with NPM or anything. It's like on your own discretion. So yeah, you can search for components. So we can search for a category, for example. Not so much interesting parts. But there are some very interesting components which work together with the OLIP. And if we look for that, you see we have the OLIP updater, the OLIP browser, the OLIP dependency, and the OLIP link. The OLIP link is deprecated, was mainly for the old version. But we have the OLIP dependency and the OLIP browser. And these two are quite important components. So I'm going to switch over to TouchDesigner. Because if you download the OLIP browser and put it into your project, it will be this, basically this container. Now we can disable this, because if I press F8, it opens up. And as you can already see, it looks somewhat similar to the website, because it is. And this is like the main reason, is being able to have a palette that is always up to date and is not in any way relying on version updates pushed out by derivative. So maybe let's use a nice visual filter. For example, here the 2D particle emitter. So I click this. We have this window. So again, we have the same README. We can select the version, and when I press place, I got the component in my project. So I didn't have this component on my computer. It's directly downloaded. So just to show you it's not a fluke, let's take let's take something like this. Okay, and download, and here we have, again, a component. Quite nice. So if I put in a movie file in, yeah. And the best thing about this is you don't have to download it every time. So when I'm going to press again, it's not downloading it, but instead it will put them in the palette here. So under my components, you will then have an OLIP folder, and inside you will have all the components that you're already in any way installed. Yes, they will be saved into your, so globally over every TouchDesigner instance and every project. So if you are offline, use the palette. If you are not, use the OLIP browser. This way you will always get the latest version. But you also have here on the left, you have like this version and build number. So another component that is quite interesting is the OLIP dependency. So if I just changed the name because so let's place this here. And what the OLIP dependency is doing, it's giving an error. But this is totally okay. Because what you can do is, if we check the info, we have a get component function. And what this is doing is it is looking for an operator with the target operator shortcut. And if it can't find it, it will download the component, place it into your project, and return it. So where do I use this, for example? For example, I, of course, use it in the TouchCT preset manager. So just going to zoom out a little bit. Oh, it's already there. Spoiled the fun there. So as you can see right now, we don't have the tweener anywhere in our project. But now if I put in the preset system here, so okay, we had like a little little wiggle and a little waiting, and now if we go up, the tweener appeared magically. And yeah, basically the idea between this, or the idea behind the OLIP dependency component is that you are able, that you don't have to distribute components like the tweener or TDPIP always with every instance of this component, but instead you can be like, okay, this is just like an external dependency, I'm just going to download it, and if it's already there, then I'm just gonna use it. So for example, just gonna use the QR code example here, or maybe I'm just checking if I have an updated version of this. No, that's the correct one. So gonna place it, it didn't have to download because it's already there. Just gonna place it, and suddenly, okay, TDPIP opens, TDPIP installs, and we have our QR code reader. And if we look inside, there's no TDPIP anywhere to be seen, but instead we have this OLIP dependency component here. So yeah, I think that's everything I have to say about the OLIP. Maybe a little bit about the future. I'm currently the only person maintaining it, more or less. And I will definitely expand on the whole OLIP system or the OLIP ecosystem, in regard that I really would like to also be able to export DLL plugins. Then there's an idea of snippets, so basically something like the OP snippets, but that you can just upload them to an online repository. And also being able to upload notch blocks that you can, and the idea is to have them all being able to just drag and drop them into your project directly from the OLIP browser component here. And yeah, in theory, there also is the whole OLIP updater component, but this is, I did not implement it myself in any project by now, so we'll see. Maybe it gets used, but yeah. Any questions?
If you want to contribute things, do you have like a boilerplate example, or like do you have like a YouTube video kind of like showing the process of contributing the codes?
Maybe I should do that. So in general, it is. Yeah, I think I don't really have a component or like a guide how to contribute, but it's relatively straightforward, I would say, in a regard that you get, when you create a component, you get a boilerplate README that you should adhere to. But yeah, for example, the whole built-in version thing, I should definitely explain this a little bit more. And also in regard to the parameters you see here, the name, author, version, build, and the OLIP link. These are parameters that will get added automatically when you use the OLIP browser. And yeah, for the future, I think it's a good idea to create like a boilerplate component that you can then continue to work off. This is, yeah.
We have 3 questions from the chat.
Yes.
First of all, Masha wants to know, is it possible to spread malware with Toxis?
Definitely yes. Absolutely. It's inside is running Python. So TouchDesigner is a Python interpreter, and yeah, that's definitely possible. So always, as I said, on your own discretion, be careful what you download. I mean, this basically is for everything. It's the same for NPM packages. There were some news about NPM packages that used loopholes. But yes, this is definitely a topic you have to keep in mind. And I'm probably will also put this in a little warning messages. I've been thinking about this whole situation myself. But luckily by now there wasn't a known situation. in that regard.
Then we have Jack XS who asks, Wieland, can you on purpose download a not latest version and show a version update process?
Okay, yeah, I can do that. So for example, let's remove the preset manager here. As I said, there isn't like a good native way of doing this by now, but let's put in the OLEP updater here. And now let's update something with an older version. Maybe let's take the routed web server. So let's take the version 0.1 here.
Michelle says that nobody can see the screen that who's working the camera.
They're on a delay. They're
Okay.
looking.
So here we have the routed web server, version 0.1, and here we have the OLEP updater. And then we put in the target. And as you can see, the slug automatically got added to it. Basically because it it lives already inside of here in the VC OLEP link. And then we write a little text. I really hope this works. So let's take a look inside to get an idea. And then we say op OLEP updater dot update. And now if we execute the script, I hope this works. We get an error, but we get some new stuff inside. So it seems like this one updated actually. So yeah, that would be a way to update them, but I definitely have to implement this in a more visible way. Let's state it this way.
And then follow-up question to that. Is the OLEP palette global here for this TP build, or are you managing per projects? Likely a user would like a version in one project and not the same in another.
Basically, you download a component, and it will be saved to the palette, to the local palette, and you will have a local copy of the component inside of your project. So you don't have to, basically you don't have to think about it updating it on itself. So once it's in your project, it is in your project. I'm currently thinking about a good way how to externalize them, but externalizing the components and having them reload on start kind of needs a very specific setup of the component. So a component itself needs to be stateless basically, because the moment you update it, you lose all your state inside of a component. So for now, I went with the way of saying, okay, it is inside of your project, it's saved as a backup inside of your project. And you have the possibility with components like the OLEP dependency and the OLEP and TDPIP to have them download the latest version or a very specific version depending every time you load it in again.
Last question from the chat from Greg. Can we see the dependency parameters again? You can have a hierarchy of dependencies.
Can
we see the dependency parameters again? Part one. And then second part of the question is, can you have a hierarchy of dependencies?
So you can have a dependency inside of a dependency. This is definitely possible. So this is basically what is happening with the QR code component, because the QR code component is looking for TDPIP, and then TDPIP gets downloaded, and then TDPIP downloads and installs the QR code module from pip. I mean, it's not like OLIP dependency to OLIP dependency, but this is definitely possible, no problem. Because the process of downloading the dependency components is blocking, so you don't have like this async situation. You have a little stutter on the first startup, but afterwards then it's all loaded.
That's it from the chat.
Okay. Yes, Mickey.
I'm a big fan of the OLIP, and I use it on a daily basis. But I figured maybe not everybody knows some of the more handy components that are in there. Maybe you want to point them out, like cleaner or.
Oh yeah.
Like why would people use OLIP? What's inside?
What's inside? Ooh, so there definitely is.
They sort them based on like most downloaded, right?
Not in the browser, but actually that would be quite interesting. I mean, we can also just it's the wrong one. Yes, I know I use Edge right now. So the most downloaded, as I said, for example, is the SOP UV unwrapper component. We have the tweener. Who knows of the tweener? It's a programmatic way of interpolating between values for a parameter. So, and with like different curves. This is what is quite heavily used in the TouchDesigner preset manager. We have TD-pip. I think this is probably, who knows of TD-pip? A little bit more. Basically what TD-pip is doing, it's it's like a pip dependency component to install external Python modules directly from pip. It's not working with every component because some components have like huge complex, I don't know what all, but especially for smaller stuff, it's working quite nice. The preset manager. The bloom is very nice.
Maybe you should just show what the tweener does, because like it's an amazing component. I don't know.
Okay, then.
Like show an example of like how it's not having toxins.
Okay, so yeah, let's put in the tweener here. So, the tweeners also. Oh yeah, because we have several tweeners. So what we're going to actually do is we're going to place a dependency object, and we're going to put in that we want to have the tweener, and the slug is also the tweener. And we are going to create a constant here. And what we can now do is we can write a little script here. Let's check the name. And first we have to define what is our tweener. So this is the process how I normally nowadays use the tweener, because I no longer directly import it into my projects, but I'm using the OLIP dependency, saying OP OLIP dependency get component like this. And then I say tweener.absolute tween. I'm looking for op constant 1.par.color r. I want to set it to a value of 0.3, and I want to do it in the time of 3 seconds.
Color R needs an R.
Oh no. So now when I run the script here, I get an error. In getCom OP shortcut is not defined. No. Aspolut. Oh. Let's try that again. Oh, we still get an error. This is quite interesting. Name OP shortcut is not defined. Now that's not good. Let's see what the tweener. Yeah. That never happened before. It just can't perform under pressure. Yeah, this is not working right now, so what I'm just going to do I'm just going to say op.tweener. I have to fix that. I'm going to fix that. So now if I select this, we see we have the color R, and now when I run this okay, now so now when I run script, finally have it. And the best thing is, so maybe let's take a parameter here, and let's look at this, and let's put it into a trail, and let's set it to a value of 1 again. And now we run the script again. As you can see, it's like not a clear linear interpolation, but instead it has like this nice curve to it. So, and there are quite a lot of different curves that I'm not going to get too much into, but you can always find it. If we look here in the tweener, you can always find it inside of the documentation. So as you can see, there are quite a lot of curves that you can use to interpolate between the values. Well, let's look at 1 or 2 visual filters maybe. Let's take a visual generator and look for them. Yeah, it is quite a lot of Simon stuff. Let's take, for example, the noodle salad here, which of course doesn't work because my GPU driver is not up to date and it uses the line material. Oh yeah, the simple plexus component, just doing a thing. And what's quite nice about this component is if we put in a slider, it's deterministic, so we can just scrub around. So if we would link it to a timeline, for example, what I use quite a lot right now is using the event listener, event emitter system. It's maybe quite interesting for some of you. So here we have the event emitter. So basically what you can do is you can just get rid of this here real quick, like this. And now you see, okay, they have a link. And now I can call here, I can call the emit function. And then here in the listener, I have a callback. And the good thing is I can have like as many listeners to this event emitter as I would like. So
what's an example? A YouTube example?
Yeah, that's quite hard. So I implemented this just in a project that we are working on. And there we have the situation that we have some global settings that need to change. And because we want to keep everything as separate as possible and working on itself without having to reference anything in another component. So if I have 2 components here, like the base 1 and base 2, but it's like my personal preference, I never want to have any kind of reference from base 2 to base 1 and the other way around. I don't want to have any reference inside of base 1 to something inside of base 2. So let's, for example, we have a let's say we have a color system. Do we have a color system? No, let's say we have a video playback in base 2 and we have video playback in base 1. And they both play completely different videos, but we want to both of them to be able to react to an outside message. So what we could do is I could create another base here, and this is the controller component. And then I could tell the controller component, okay, hey, tell base 1 what to do, tell base 2 what to do. And this would work. And suddenly it's like, okay, we need a third base. And then I would have to go back into the controller and tell the controller, hey, controller, you also have to tell base 3. And suddenly it's like, okay, but base 3 behaves differently. And what I can then now do is I can create an event emitter on the top level here and can basically go into base 1, 2, 3 and say all 3 bases subscribe to this one emitter. And then I can take the controller and tell the controller, hey, you just have to tell the emitter. So the controller doesn't even know that there are 3 components listening to what it has to say. And the best part is also, then I can also create another controller, like a manual controller to run my tests. Because I have to check some components, like I have to check certain events, and I can't rely on something like a timeline or a clock. And then I can just write my test controller here, for example, and can tell the test controller, hey, just tell the emitter, and the emitter will take care of it. And then suddenly it's like, oh, the base 1, 2, 3 don't know that there are 2 controllers, and the controllers don't know that there's base 1, 2, 3. And it's all running through this middleman here, the emitter.
So it's not hierarchy dependent, right?
Exactly. So it's like I can be inside of here and be inside of here and can be inside of here and so forth, and still point to the same emitter. What's another nice component? Yeah, the web client. I think this will be the last one, otherwise we can talk afterwards. Yeah, the queried web client component I think I use the most. And basically, who has experience in web development? Who uses Axios? No one. How do you do your API calls? Do you use just fetch? Okay, but anyway, dang it, I thought it was a good analogy. Basically, it is a wrapper around the web client component. And it's taking care of quite a lot of different situations. For example, it gives you an API like delete, get, patch, post, put. So you don't have to like construct the requests to your server yourself, but instead it's like I just write, for example, op query. And I think I made an example here in the interact for Pokemon Ditto. So, and then I just have to give it an endpoint. So now if we run this, yes, we get a response. And this is because here in the settings, I also set the server. So I don't have to every time construct the complete URL, but instead the queried web client is taking care of this. Also, it offers a little bit more. If we look here, so for example, we can give it params, so like query params. We can give it an additional header component. We can give it data, so of course not for the get, but and we can give it a callback function. So this is super. This is quite important for like the whole async workflow, because this one works completely asynchronous. And what it also does is it gives you like a nice set of callbacks. So we have the on response, we have the on error, we have the on query empty. I'm gonna talk about this, and we have an on timeout. Basically, why the name queried web client? Oh no. Stefan, weißt du, wo die Fernbedienung ist für den Bildschirm. Ich glaube, es ist die da, oder? Müssen wir mal auf. Ich glaube, auf OK drücken.
Die andere hat sich übrigens auch ausgeschaltet, der war zu warm.
Oh, na sowas ist aber, es ist aber auch warm. So basically, why the name queried web client? The problem with the web client that as it is right now, it changed in the new experimental version, is that it can only handle one request at a time. So what this one does is it's creating a queue of requests, and it's like doing one after the other, after the other, after the other. And when all requests are done, then it just says, okay, on query empty. So you have a callback to catch that specific event. And yeah, you can also give it a header table. So if you need, if you are working with an API that requires an API key or something like this, you can just put the API key into a table that, and then, so it would be, nope. But yeah, this is going quite far right now, so so bearer, and then you put in the token like this, and then you can just drop it in, and then it will append this header to every request you make with it. And yeah, I use this one a lot, quite a lot, because this is what I do quite a lot right now on several jobs, where it's like, okay, API fetching, even more API fetching. Yeah, otherwise, I mean, just take a look around, stroll around, and find the component that you might be interested in. Also feel free to register, upload a component yourself. And yes, I think I will stop now, because I could like continue quite a lot. Yes?
Is there a plan to implement some kind of monetization?
No, because monetization, especially in an international context, gets quite complicated very fast. Because then I would have to take care of like taxes. Is it like business to business? Is it an end user? Who is uploading and selling the component, from which country they do come, and then suddenly it's like this whole weird triangle situation where I'm like, I'm not a finance person, I'm a developer, so I'm going to stick with what I have to do. Also, I think this is definitely an open discussion, the whole monetizing of components thing or situation, where it's like, okay, several people tried to do that, and after a while they all just released it under like a free-to-use, non-commercial license as an open source, or even as an open source project. And I think basically the main reason is, okay, we are still quite a niche community. We aren't so big that you could be able to like support yourself by selling a plugin for like $20 and make enough of it, because most of the times you will probably end up with maybe selling 10, maybe 20, even like maybe over several years like 100, and then you would have like 2,000 euro. But you would have quite a lot of people who are like, hey, I paid for your component, so you have to give me support. And this like takes just up a lot of time. Let's say, for example, with the Unity store, which just has like a much broader scope of users, and users that are also willing to pay. This is a complete different story. Also, you have the middleman of them handling the store, the company behind the editor. So I think basically my personal gist in regard to selling TouchDesigner components is, hey, I'm giving them away. Everyone can use them. You can even use them commercially. I don't really care. But I'm not giving any support, except you pay me. And also I have a Patreon, by the way, just saying. So
And is there some plans to kind of put some community aspect into the whole area?
in
Like That kind of what keeps me away from uploading there. I also love making components and stuff.
Yeah.
Building a community and things like that.
I think it's so in theory there already is a comment function. So it exists API-wise. There already are comments. You just can't see them. But in theory, if you would dig a little bit into the API, you could even post them. But but I think the main problem is that creating another side community isn't ideal. But so I have some ideas in this regard. For example, I would like to create a monthly gist where it's like, hey, these are the new components, these are the updates to components. Another one is creating a Twitter bot that basically just tweets every time someone uploads a component. And yeah, following is kind of implemented by this little button here, but there isn't really that much in regard of community right now. But I would put this after the big idea of broadening the scope a little bit to bring maybe also in the notch developers and being able to create the gist so it's like a little broader and not just pure talks. Very toxic. And also one feature that in theory already exists, but I removed for the version 2 right now, is collections. So being able to grab components, put them in a collection, and then sharing, for example, the collection because you're making a workshop, or you're like, hey, these are all the OLIP components, or here are all my components that are collected in this topic. But yeah, definitely comments, collections, Twitter bot, and the newsletter email. These are on the table, but trying to build like a whole community is, I think, just counterproductive because we have the Discord and we have the forum, like the official forum at Derivative. So, and again, because we are like this quite niche community and a small community, I think it would just hurt to even more trying to broaden the field where communication is happening. So the idea is upload your component to the OLIP and then post it to the official Derivative site, put in the link there, and then basically all the communication in regard to this component can happen there.
In terms of submitting components, like there might be things learned from how frameworks always did it, like the OLIP add-ons work.
Who?
OLIP add-ons .org or the company. It's basically like the OLIP except for frameworks. And what was very nice with that one is that everything was based on GitHub. So like if you use certain keywords in your repo, it would end up in the OLIP add-ons website.
It's quite interesting.
Like you could, for instance, use the GitHub releases option or something like that.
Yeah, I was thinking about the about integrating OLIP, and I think there's like this OLIP workers or OLIP services where you can basically link your OLIP account to your GitHub account, and when you push to your repo to a certain branch, then it will be uploaded to the OLIP. Yeah, well, I like this idea, but yeah, I mean, how much time? Or maybe I might invite even people to help me. Yeah.
I mean, I think you're thinking about automating some things anyway.
I know where you work. Yeah, I could take a break. Cool, thank you.
We'll have a little break and then we're going to be back with Markus Heckmann. from the bar to the stage. Da ist noch der XS hat noch mal irgendwas hier.
X. Can you have multiple? That's not
Entity level.
multiple.
Scheiß Kamera hat eine Grafik gezeigt. Intern zu warm.
Scheiße.
No!
Aber lass mich.
Oh, hat die Scheiße nicht funktioniert!
Alter, die ist halt gerade war so, hä, ich hab's geupdatet und es hat funktioniert auf jeden Fall. Aber vielleicht habe ich da irgendwas in dem Update verhauen.
Aber genau das solltest du auf jeden Fall öfters machen, weil ich glaube, die Leute spielen also wie richtig geil dieses Tool ist, um die Aufgaben
Ja.
Weil ich merke es erst dadurch, dass ich den Luxus habe, das da so oft übertragen zu dürfen.
Ja, mit Wiki mit Wiki ist jetzt auf jeden Fall ziemlich viele von den Animations, die wir dann im Projekt haben, laufen inzwischen auch über den Spieler. Da habe ich jetzt.
Also was läuft denn nicht über den Spieler in der korrekten Welt?
switches, so I can just click for example, like 2, 3, or 4, and I have different presets. So then press 2, then just auto space to look like
Oh, wir können gleich auf Screen gehen. Ja, ist in Ordnung.
But I mean, I have 8 systems running, but I have one that can still run it on
Kann losmachen?
32 frames per second. Or like,
Dann
Scene changer.
ah ja, die sah aus.
Ich mach dich jetzt mal auf die Kamera. Dann fade ich rüber.
Dann fädst du rüber. Okay. All right. Well, we'll start with the third part. Thanks so much, Wieland, Stefan, Node Institute. It's really nice to be back and have people around. We had the last meetup. Greg, Isabel, and myself were here, 2020, and so now we'll do a restart. So that's nice. That's really great. Really happy to be among people again. And so for the next short little while, I thought maybe some of you probably already know a lot of the things we just put into the experimental release, but maybe it's a good idea for everybody to see what we've been doing. And after that, I'll just quickly talk about a project I've been working on and have been performing in at MUTEC in Barcelona. That's why also that how I basically came here. And yeah, so the major thing, and unfortunately it's probably the best picture for it, what we did in the last 2 years is rip out the basement from, or the foundation from TouchDesigner, which was OpenGL, and convert the whole thing into Vulkan. Why is this picture very indicative for it? Because it doesn't necessarily change much visually on the, all looks the same, except we are kind of setting the, we're setting the stage for improvements that go in all directions, especially in the visual direction. So this allows us to go forward for the foreseeable future with now everything being Vulkan. The Apple uses Metal, so we're using converter API there, MoltenVK, to have this also run on Apple, which means mostly it's a reduction on overhead, and compute shaders now work on all platforms. So this is kind of a major, probably a major thing. Another technical side note, because it's a new release, we've also updated the we also updated Python again. So now we're running on Python 3.9.5. A visual change that is, funnily enough, best to be seen on high resolution displays, and I just have a 1080p here, so it's not really that apparent, but all the panels are now high DPI and resolution independent. It doesn't actually create fixed textures anymore, but renders directly to screen. So lines are really, or borders are really pixel borders, and yeah, it just really looks much better. Now that I see it here on a 1080, I can't really say much about it, but if you look at it on a 4K screen, it looks very nice and crisp, very pretty. Related to this, perhaps, and you kind of see it in some of the elements here, we added something that is the text comp. And the text comp now allows for simple formatting. It's using the slug library, and this is also rendering directly. So what you can see is that when you're zooming in, the text just stays really nice and crisp, which is, for me, like, this is a dream come true for to have nice text pretty rendered text. And you have some formatting options in here with a formatting language. Here I'm using a specification table for the text and for the text component itself, which is a panel component. You have the option to specify position and text. And then you see this formatting language here where you can change the color or, for example, add a skew to it or have a gradient. The gradient here for Institute, it's fairly simple. It's basically you specify 2 colors and then you turn the gradient on and you can turn it off again this way. There is, if you go to our wiki, you can find a page that explains all the different formatting options that are available. It's not as, like, it's not a complete language. You cannot bold stuff, for example, because bolding would mean switching fonts, but you have quite a bit of options already, so this is helpful. Similarly, we also added a text comp, so geometry. This doesn't necessarily create geometry, but it just creates the it just renders directly, so you don't have access to, there's nothing inside basically, it's empty. But this also uses a specification table, and these specification tables are much more, allow for much more manipulation. It's still string based, so each row would be 1 string. Here, for example, I just used, I just typed that into the search engine and got the 1,000 most used words in English, and then with like a couple pattern chops basically made it a circle, changed the font size, added the rotation and some random colors. So what you get is this animating ring of 1,000 words that are transforming in a circle. So this is obviously quite useful for a lot of works like word clouds or things like that that you previously had to do with big textures in 3D. You have now the option to do this with specification tables, much simpler. Again, I just use here TXTY, font size, RZ, font color, and text, but there's a bunch of other options there, which you can find on our documentation as well. Maybe worthwhile looking at it. There is, there's definitely more stuff coming here, but currently it's rotation per line. Probably what we're looking at is also that you can like do it along a path with getting rotation per character, things like that. But those are just things that will come later. So yeah, this the specification table is quite extensive. What you can do there. Another thing is these long asked for comments and network boxes and annotate components. So with the help of our nice text rendering now, you can actually create these annotation boxes fairly simply. So for example, if I just Alt and left click and make a selection here, then it creates an annotate component around it. Everything that's inside the annotate component now is locked inside, so you can move these things around quite nicely. And you can leave, type in a title, whatever, and some comments here. You can also do just comment boxes. So comment boxes are these things here. They don't have the header line. They're basically just a simple version of the what I showed above here, the annotate. And because we cannot just do something simple, we have to make it a little bit more useful. So annotates also allow to have background operators. So in this case, I just use the audio filter as the background operator here. This basically can be anything. This can be sliders, whole interfaces, so placing your panels inside the network naturally and having operators around it is totally possible. that might come up later. When I perform, I don't know what perform mode is, so it's amazing for me because I can just have my network, have my panel there, control it where stuff happens, and work with TouchDesigner, I believe, the way it was invented for. Oh, yeah.
Can we put a network inside of an annotate?
A network inside of a
network editor window, like a pane inside.
Like a pane. Yeah. I can't show that to you here publicly, but there are ways of doing that. Yes, because these things are interactive. Like you can make, if I select this annotate component, you can turn on the viewer interaction. So now this viewer is actually interactive. Hence, yes, black holes into other components might be a possibility at some point. Or not black holes, wormholes. There would be a wormhole. I'm looking very forward to this. This will create intensely complex environments. So that's good, yeah. Yeah. The preview, there's a viewer display parameter on it. So you see also we went a funny way here. This annotate component, you can find that in the comp family, but actually it has a couple custom operators. So these custom operators then do have the option to turn off your background and things like that. It has another function, especially the for example, here I select the annotate component that I made, but when I select the network box, it doesn't show any parameters because we made specifically those are just nodes essentially. An annotate component is just a component, just an operator, but it might not be, when you leave a lot of comments, it might dirty up your network. So we added a utility flag which can be set, which hides these operators from your opfind or from anything where you're looking for operators. It hides them. This is the case here with this network box. It doesn't show up as a node. You have to kind of look for it. You can also have, like here I just have a comment box inside annotate, so they live together. They can be hierarchical, so you can go as complex as you like. Yeah, simple interaction here to create a an annotate component. As I said, you just alt left click and drag to create that. The colors of these of all of them, of the comment boxes, the annotate component and the network boxes, can be easily controlled by the little color menu in your network. So hitting C, you get the colors, and then you can change the color of that. That's a simple parameter in the back color here, which has an expression set. So it's just fetching it from there, but it makes it easy to color these. Where did I write that down here? I have it somewhere. Sorry?
Can I collapse the images?
That's a good idea. Collapse. Annotate.
I have a question.
Yep.
Where exactly are these annotate things being calculated? Because I saw like from 57 frames per second it dropped to 45. Deactivated the viewer and reactivated.
This could be also. I mean, it's all drawing straight to the network pane, and I do like to blame a lot on this machine. It shouldn't be too. They're not too invasive in the general.
I'm not really sure how Vulkan works nowadays, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, yeah. It's all drawn as one canvas, so it shouldn't be too invasive on it. It's probably other stuff that I have here that's causing that. When I zoom out, I'm dropping frames quite heavily. And I do have a second and a third TouchDesigner actually running. So yeah, you can create, I said the component, the annotate components fairly simply. With Shift-C, you create little comment boxes. And with Shift-B, you create network boxes. So easy interaction there as well to control these, delete, removes them for you. More on the developer side, something that I'm a little bit excited about is the par groups here. It's, as it says here, it's a more natural way to work with parameters. So for example, we have these parameters here, which is translate, but as you know, when you click on it, you actually have a tx, ty, tz as separate parameters. So translate, even when we talked about this in workshops as a parameter, it's not a parameter, it's actually 3 parameters. Meaning when you were running parameter execute dots or something like this, you change one of those and it runs the on value change, for example, 3 times, depending on how many of those you change. This was a little bit not so like optimal. So then we basically now have, oh right, and this is also, sorry, slight diversion. With the new text rendering, you have syntax highlighting in dots, which is quite nice as well. The dots use the same font render engine, so it's also crisp and beautiful and nicely readable now. So now with these par groups, what you get is one call if a par group changes. So a par group could be translate or T. It's already indicated or was indicated already. When I roll over the translate parameter, you see T at the top, which is the par group. And therefore, now when I change one parameter, it takes the par group and sets another par group of my camera to the same value. Not sure how useful this example is, but I hope you get the idea. And we can extend the whole thing by actually these par groups now being Python objects. We can have different more properties on it, basically. So for example, the length parameter has this funny menu in the end, the unit menu, where you can switch between seconds, samples, frames, and seconds. And this used to be a separate parameter. Well, it still is a separate parameter, but they're pretty tight together, like they're one unit in a sense. So now with par groups, you basically can get to it because this is a par group unit object. So now you can say par group.unit.val. And this hints that we can extend these parameters by context. So if you have, you could have a transform par group, for example, or you can have a color par group, and the color par group could have functions to operate on the color itself. If you want to have this as an HSV or something like this. Not that this would be implemented at the moment, but that's the direction we're going to. Another thing, and this is funny because we showed this already 2 years ago, but here it is the audio VST shop, which allows to load VST3 plugins into TouchDesigner and have your synthesizers basically, or oh, I don't have audio. But anyway, you see that it's coming. Oh, maybe I should output actually some audio. That's useful. I can't see it. Damn it. Audio device out. Nothing. Let's see. Still nothing, but you get the idea. This I blame on whatever, not on me. So yeah, these are basically, yeah, you just load in audio VST3 plugins, control them. You can get all the parameters in, my frame rate drops quite a bit here, but that's probably because of the parameters here. But so that's maybe not the greatest example then, but it's possible. And control the inputs. And now I'm not sure what these inputs are, but you have enough Python functionality there to send MIDI notes to it, etc. Fun to play with. Please try it out and give us feedback on this if you're interested in this realm, because this is for us important to understand how it's used and how useful it is to everybody.
Is it also possible to get out on specific parameters?
Yeah, there's this learn parameters. So opening up the GUI, now moving the cutoff gives me the cutoff. Yeah, and the last thing and this is something that we're still working on, and Michel Didier is very busy building the required components to it. By itself, it looks very simple. It's just a WebRTC DAT, which allows for connections between WebRTC clients and establishing data, video, and audio channels between those to send, data, like arbitrary data, video and audio channels through this. Currently, Michel is very busy building the signaling components, because this is something for a WebRTC setup to understand who is connected or who is there, who can be connected together, and then a WebRTC component to create the different channels that can be transmitted between those WebRTC clients, because they are talking to each other directly. And hopefully, now it's a standard, yet the implementation is very open. So for every application of WebRTC, you might find that it has a different implementation, and hence it would be difficult for us to create every implementation. But we hope that the WebRTC that holds enough functionality to allow for all of those. So if you want to, and this is I just cannot think of a better example, but and I know it's a difficult one, but if you want to communicate with Jitsi or something like this, then this might be a very complicated task to do, but it should be possible. You should be able to do this over this via the DAT.
By the way, Markus, Greg says callbacks for MIDI out.
On receive MIDI. Yes. So, more? Yeah, a lot of these operators, I didn't mention this, of course, yeah. A lot of these operators that we added come with callbacks. This is something that we rely on more and more. You see this in the text comp as well. A lot of callbacks already attached to it, and that is with the audio VST as well, and obviously with the WebRTC. There's more, but you can always see all the changes that have been brought into this release on our release notes, and yeah, check it out. The release is really stable, I would say, the experimental, and I say this with confidence because, and this brings me to my next part of this talk, because I usually just run my performances on the experimental release. Just have to trust the system. And those are a couple pictures I just actually got today from the performance in Barcelona. So I'm going to use Edge as well for this. And point to my website just to give a little bit of concept. This page is not working. Project1.net HTTPS maybe? What? It makes me sad. We just talked outside, and people were surprised that I have a website, but apparently I don't have a website. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, for the context I meant to give is that Franz Joban here, she saw a performance that I did with Matt Thibodeau years ago, and then asked me to work with her and Richard Cartier on a performance that Duo was called, which we showed in 2019, and then it was shown once more. So yeah, it was shown twice, and then she went into a research project on quantum physics and asked me if I could help her with the visual component of it. My first reaction on this was that quantum physics, I feel, really is kind of like a trap, because there's so much that people interpret into it, and it's always a little bit difficult what you how do you even visualize something that cannot be really visualized? But it was a really interesting a really nice, interesting project for this. She basically said she's looking at her topics where, and I had to write that down, the Copenhagen interpretation, which kind of also says that we don't really need to worry so much about quantum physics, because in the macro world it doesn't apply, and only in the quantum world it has its effects. The other topics are the fluidity of time, that you basically don't have an absolute measurement of time, like time depends. Even if I move the beer bottle up a little bit, time goes differently for the beer bottle than on the table. And the third one was a section on parallel worlds. But so what I created, this is kind of the third installment of just experimenting with tops, essentially, and using tops as inputs to an instancing network. And the general approach is one of a multitude of frequency modulators that then get composited together, and with some RGB delays and probably lens distortions. I use this in a performative manner to create different visualizations that I feel are A, fitting to the music, and B, fitting to the topic. And this is highly like, how do you say, not subjectable, but subjective. Yeah. So how to explain this? I feel like the last time I showed a network, it was the same idea. Is there lots of knowledge in this? Is there lots of technique in this? I don't know. There is a lot of just being comfortable with the environment. Because in the end, I create something that just works, that just creates different images. So here I have my composited frequency modulators, and there's 4 of them that are converted to tops, and then literally it goes into a big compositing chain with does lens distort really have a role in this sense? Probably not, but by using it, when you play around with things, you really get a feel for what it does, and the interpretation in the end is completely something else. So this is my position input. Sorry, I do have some MIDI controls to change stuff here. Touch OSC bridge is on. Cancel. Touch OSC. So I have a little control panel in Touch OSC, And yeah, so this is basically what's being displayed. So it's not necessarily, again, it's questionable if this is pretty or anything. But the visual representation as a geometry of this is then this kind of a ring. And I can expand this ring into this multitude of many basically sine wave functions that are overlaid that are then create arguably interesting patterns. I can add noise to it or create these kind of patterns with it. Oh wait, that's the wrong slider. You can create these kind of little wires almost that are moving along there, very fine detailed things. But all of it is these UV maps with yeah, applied noise and wave functions from the very beginning. So this is a fully, it's always experimentation for me. I just sit there and start with a certain system and then extend the system until I have the looks that I kind of want to have over the whole performance. There's no music input in the whole thing, so the connection between the music and the video is me. And perhaps, so you could say it's traditional, it's kind of a traditional approach to video, like very VJ based in a way, just that you have to rehearse a lot because you have to learn all the 30 parameters and how they work together, because not everything works together. Switching between certain things just is very chaotic, so it cannot be done. So you have to find ways of how you actually get from A to B, and how to do this a little bit gracefully, basically. White. But I'm always amazed how much of a, yeah, this is also, that's the texture, but this is then the output to it. So I'm always really happy to be able to find these kind of visuals in TOPS itself. I find that interesting to just experiment with them and change values, try what works, what doesn't work. On a technical level, this is really simple. This is a 1080p image, which is being instanced onto with a geometry, and then another further. I do like the lens distort quite a bit. It adds a little bit of an distortion to it, as well as the other thing that I do enjoy is the RGB delay that you can find in the palette. Yeah.
There's a question from the chat. Masha asked, could you show an example of one of your wave functions, please?
Sure. They're fairly simple. It's basically a pattern chop, or a few pattern chops, adding various sines together, or sines, cosines, and then passing it through a function chop. Then I'm trimming out a section and convert that to a top again. So now the parameters for that one. just a bunch of parameters on these.
But Greg, do you capture, say, the use settings or networks that you like?
I try, but actually it never, these systems, they're built as instruments. So I cannot go back. Once you change the instrument has changed. You have to learn to play it. So yeah, no. I mean, I save, not often, as you might see. Way too less. I lose a lot of work. I've been, yeah, it's terrible. I've been doing this stuff for 16 years, and hitting Control S is still very not natural for me. Yeah. Another example of this, perhaps, and I really try to tell people, experiment, try what you can do, and tops are an amazing way to do this, especially now that we added tops that are function tops that kind of recreate the chops itself. So you have certain simple mathematical functions in tops as well. It gives you a great space for experimentation. I just recently got, oh right, maybe I should show, I wanted to show some of the actual performance video here. Let's try to find something. You can create these quite complex elements. It's all just 2D. There's no three-dimensionality to it. It's just a plane, basically. But it creates, through the overlay of the many particles, it can create the shading or the perception of a three-dimensional object. So, yeah, shapes and stuff that comes out of it. And just a couple of days ago, or yesterday actually, there was a video published that the musician, he's also Berlin-based, Kamaru, asked me to do for him a piece. And this is also a little bit, let's see if that plays borderless. It's a fairly, well, like this I can jump around. It's a fairly dense thing. You can't hear the audio is very ambient, but it has a lot of a character, as if there's, like, you might see, I don't know what you might see. You might see some, I'm not going to tell you what you see. You might see something. It has a certain aesthetic to it, as I find, and it has a lot of detail in it, which I enjoy as well. Like the when you look really closely, all these lines are not just overlaid, but they actually break a little bit on the shapes that are apparent. Like this is just a circle, but the diagonal lines actually break a little bit on these on the edges of these shapes, and I really enjoy that as a detail that you can concentrate on. And it gets a little bit frenetic or something. So the principle for this is also experimentation with something that might not be necessarily made for this purpose. Mostly here, what I'm using, or what the main effect is the where is it? It's the spectrum top. Now I don't know if this is going to work on this video card, but let's try. The spectrum top gives you similar, like, you know, the spectrum. It doesn't. No, this video card doesn't like it. Sorry. But the spectrum top basically does the same thing as the spectrum chop. So it gives you the frequencies and phases for all your colors, just in 2D. It's a 2D based one for one color channel. Now, it has similar as the audio spectrum. let's just look at the audio spectrum. The audio spectrum has a visualization mode, but it also has the time to magnitude and phase mode. And perhaps I should use an audio file in here. So the visualization mode actually is the more common one that you might see. It gives you this kind of a spectrum. But the time to magnitude and phase mode is the one that lets you see the actual magnitude and phase of the signal. And then with another audio spectrum lets you convert it back to audio waveform. So magnitude and phase to time goes back to the input. So you convert back. So in between here and here, you can monkey around with the signal, which is great because the same applies to textures. You have derivative, and I mean, if it would work, that would be great, but it doesn't. And you have node, and you have two channels. One is phase, one is magnitude, the other is phase. So now nobody, well, you put two switches here, for example. Switch 1 between the two, and switch 2 between the two, and now you reorder them to be the first input is input 1 red. The second input will be input 2 green. So now you're mixing magnitude and phase from two different inputs. And that you can convert again to, with the spectrum, you can convert back to an image. Again, it doesn't work on my machine, unfortunately, but if it would, you have a lot of opportunity to create imagery that you might find appealing in this area here. This is the appeal area. So does it necessarily make sense? I don't know, but does it create imagery that I enjoy? It does, and it comes from experimentation mostly. And I implore everybody, you do a lot of technical things, and it's great when you do a lot of technical things, but TouchDesigner really is based, and everybody knows this story, TouchDesigner is based on audio synthesizers, which you learn by playing. And this software is really meant to be learned by playing, and the visual part of Touch, the tops, allow for this in a great way. So that's what I do, and I think that's maybe my website works again. No. But you can find me at Derivative. So thanks. If there's any questions or.
I have a question regarding welcome. Will we have to learn welcome and just forget about GLSL, or?
No, GLSL is not touched by that. Vulkan is really underlying, or it's the architecture of it, but GLSL is not anything that changes there.
You mentioned that the first overhaul that this brings is the UI itself. What are like the follow-up steps on that? Like 3D render anything and stuff like that, for example?
Yeah, I mean the possibilities are wide and great there. In what direction we might go. I mean, some of the oldest parts in the software are SOPs, for example. So this is certainly an area that we're looking at. But general rendering techniques, probably another thing that comes there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Markus, very much.
Thank
For
you.
these insights. I think now we're left to socializing, but again, we're planning to do another TouchDesigner Roundtable. We might move to another location, so we don't have to limit it So sorry for doing this time with the limited tickets. We wanted to be as open as possible. We're thinking about another location. When we got it, we make another roundtable where we don't have to be limited, and then it would be really great if you have something you would like to talk about. And yeah, today again was maybe very technical, but it doesn't have to be like that. We can also totally talk art. We can talk whatever. Really, don't be shy. Come forward, and yeah, looking forward to see you then. We can still have a little bit of beer or non-alcoholic beverages here, but we would close around 11:30. But I've reserved a table for us at the Q Bar, Omega Bar, which is just 50 meters down the road. Whoever doesn't find the way home, we can hang out there a little bit longer. And thank you all for coming. It's great to meet you.
Thanks for putting this together, Stefan. It's been a long time from nothing, so
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
So,
I forgot half of the faces. 2 years.
yeah, it's good after all this bloody streaming stuff.
This works, but this doesn't. Oh! Ah, it came back.
Can you stop the stream already?
Spannendes, aber ich glaube, dass es viele Leute betrifft.
Sind NFTs nicht schon längst tot? Das interessiert sich doch keiner mehr dafür.
Gerade ist der Hype so extrem irgendwie, ja. Und es machen halt schon viele Leute auch mit Touchdesigner. Also
das ist klar.
Deswegen, ich bin auch nicht so der Fan davon, und ich glaube, es ist ein Teil der Community auf jeden Fall. Auch wenn, ich kann es vollkommen verstehen, ich habe keine einzigen NFT-Listen, aber ich glaube, tendenziell ist dann eine große Interesse innerhalb der Community da, glaube ich.
Ich glaube, das bedarf einiger interner Diskussionen, wenn man die Themen geht. Aber ich habe auch einfach das Gefühl, dass es halt immer so ein krasser Hype auf die
Geht nicht, sowas.